kids.
This is Learning to Dad
I'm the cool dad. That's my thing.
with Tyler Ross.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm gonna have fun, and you're gonna have fun.
Hello, this is Learning to Dad with Tyler Ross, and my guest today is Dave Wills. Dave is a longtime real estate agent, and before that, a real estate appraiser. He was recently appointed to the Warrenton branch office as the manager of the Long & Foster, earning great compliments from the president of Long & Foster's corporate office. Dave is also the new president of our local Realtor Association. I've known Dave for many, many years, and we've grown closer as time goes by. Dave and I have an eerie amount of overlap in our goals and our values, yet we pursue them from completely different angles. It might be fair to accuse me of being a little loosey-goosey, while some might call Dave overly strict, but I admire Dave's work ethic, his unrelenting desire to be better, and most of all, while we don't always agree, his opinion and his willingness to share it honestly. On top of this, I know him to be a very caring, very deliberate father. Thank you very much for coming, letting me interview you.
Thank you for the introduction. What I took from that was we're both a little kind of crazy. A certain kind of crazy.
That may be what draws us together. But as we're raising children, there's really no right way to do it. So my personal goal is to learn as much as I can from the people that have qualities I admire. People I know that are high achievers in their professional life, their chosen field. People I know that are critical thinkers. People that I think are good dads, and I think you are all of those things. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
But the first thing I'll start with is just tell me the current state of your family, your kids, what they're doing, what you're doing, your wife's doing, just kind of a brief overview.
We're very busy. And ironically, Fran and I joke, our oldest is now married and owns a house and has a great job. And our middle daughter is now off to college. And our young daughter, who I'm sure we'll discuss, Riley, she has special needs and requires full-time care. So Fran is at home with her all the time. We refer to ourselves as quasi-empty nesters. And we thought when Abby went off to college, wow, we'll have so much more time. So much more free time. We won't always be running around to tennis matches and everything else and picking her up and going to her events. And ironically, it seems that we are busier now than we ever were before. Because when Abby was home, it seemed like, oh, well, we can't do this. Abby's going to be home. Or, oh, we've got tennis on Thursday, so we're not going to do that. Where there was more of a routine and a schedule, which kept us at home. And now, sometimes we'll text Abby. We'll be out on the weekend, or we'll be at a friend's house, and she's like, "Who are you people? You don't go out. What are you doing?"
Yeah.
But it's fun. So we are, as I alluded to, quasi-empty nesters. Taylor, our oldest, will be 25 in April. Married her high school sweetheart last April. They both graduated from tech together. They purchased their first house already, a very nice luxury townhouse in Manassas, and they both have great jobs. So they're doing exceptionally well. And then Abby is in her freshman semester at Virginia Tech, and she's having a blast. This is her second semester. Her first day of classes start today. And she's doing exceptionally well, which is nice because all your kids are different. And when Taylor first went down to Tech, it's a big school, and they both came from a small private school environment. And so you never know exactly how that's going to work. And I think Taylor's experiences thus far were very different than Abby's. Taylor, I think, had to go through a little bit of an adjustment period, and David, they started dating in senior year of high school, and he went to Elon for a year. But he would come up and visit, obviously, almost every weekend. And then he transferred to Tech his second year. So her experience freshman year versus her remaining 3 years were almost night and day. Yeah. And whereas Abby has been all in from day one, and just loves it. So that's been kind of interesting to see. And then, with Riley, she always keeps all of us on our toes. And so, Fran's doing her thing and running her to different appointments and therapies and, all the rest of it. So it keeps us busy, but everybody's good.
Yeah, definitely. I want to speak about Riley in a little bit,
Sure.
Not necessarily right this second, because I want to get some more background for the people that are listening. You touched on so many things we're going to talk about, from education to like the introduction of a man into your daughter's life to getting married. But let's start with a little bit more background on you. Like Fran, your wife, when did you guys meet? How did you meet?
Toward the end of high school, we were walking in down the hall of Annandale High School, and I was walking alongside a mutual friend of ours, Trisha Peterson. And as we passed, she said, "Hi, Francie," and she said, "Hi, Trisha," and we just crossed paths. And I said to Trisha, "Who is that?" And she said, "Oh, that's Francie Snyder." And I said, "You need to introduce me to her."
Yeah.
So if you ever hear of love at first sight or something, it was pretty darn close to that. It was eerie.
Yeah. Was that a look, or was it a feeling, like
I
a
don't know.
vibe?
It was just, I mean, I just knew that I had to know that. I knew I had to know her, you know? So Trish put forth an introduction, and we started talking a little bit and hanging out. And I was a little bit mischievous and a little bit rambunctious in high school, so it didn't quite work out then.
Yeah.
And then we reconnected when we were both down at Radford. And her roommate used to spend a lot of time over at our house, which was a lot of people spent a lot of time at our house.
The fraternity house?
It wasn't a fraternity house, but it was a lot of fraternity people even spent a lot of time at our house. It was a fun place to be during college. And so we used to call and harass Fran at late hours and stuff like that. And came home for the summer and walked in the door. My sister said, "Some girl named Francie called you, and here's her number."
Yeah.
And I thought, I only know one Francie, and she definitely would not be calling me.
Yeah.
And it was her. And so we spent that whole summer almost every day hanging out, grabbing lunch and meeting after work and everything else. And to some extent, the rest is history, you know.
Yeah.
And then I remember my roommate in college, we were one night, and she had come over, and then she went back to her dorm. And I said to him, in the wee hours, I said, "I'm going to marry that girl."
Yeah.
And sure enough, here we are, 25 years later this August.
I absolutely love that. That's amazing. And I actually have a similar story with Sarah. I told one of her sorority sisters before we even started dating that I was going to marry that girl.
Yeah.
So there is something to that. Like, you kind of know.
I mean, I believe that for sure.
Sure, being right and being sure, knowing and being sure. I don't know if there's a difference.
Yeah. Well, I'd say I'm sure we'll go through some details in our conversation, but I would say thus far we have certainly bucked the odds.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. No doubt. So your life then, 25 years ago, at a house that even the fraternity brothers would go to,
Right.
versus now, sales manager, you know, I'm looking at Dave right now in a blue button-down shirt and a gorgeous tie. He's just all put together. And
we had a sales meeting this morning. I usually don't wear the tie.
I need to point out that you referred to your daughter's house as a luxury townhouse. Only a real estate agent would say that.
Right. I guess that's true. Well, it is nice. It's brand new, you know, and her husband works for Ryan Homes, so it's you know, if you've ever been into a builder's house or somebody who works for a builder, it's got a few extra bells and whistles. Let's put it this way: it's nicer than the house I live in now.
Well, let's stay in the history a little bit. Like, as you and Francie got, you know, to dating, and tell me about when you got married, what you were doing at the time.
So we found out we were in college and found out that we were going to be expecting a baby.
Yeah.
And so that is certainly atypical.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had Taylor when we were in college, and rightfully so. All of the parents were very concerned, you know, that we weren't going to finish our degrees. You know, we're so young, statistically speaking, those things don't turn out very well. The financial and emotional challenges that can go along with that, the lack of maturity, you know, at the time, of course, you know, it's almost like the old saying, hire a teenager while they still know everything.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you think you've got a fair amount of things figured out.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, at our age now, to be able to go back and think of what we could do then with what we know now, and of course that's an old adage, but we did. We both went back to school with our baby in tow, and we both completed our degrees, which I don't think anybody thought we would.
Yeah.
And then we got jobs. Fran was working at AOL, and you know, we moved back up to the area after about a year working in Roanoke down there after we finished our degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And then Fran was working at AOL, and I started selling IT to the Air Force with a couple different resellers. And then Abby came along 6 years later. So life was on track, professionally speaking, for both of us, and 2 kids, and, you know, moving forward. lots of goals that we thought, we were going to be trying to achieve professionally. And I don't know if I'm jumping ahead and we can bounce around, but
Sure, yeah.
And then Riley was born 2 years later, and
Yeah.
certainly everything from that day forward in our lives and our children's lives changed,
Mm-hmm.
arguably for the better in an ironic way. But in terms of the historical context, Fran no longer was able to go back to work, and then I had to figure out how to find a career where I could make a household income
Mm-hmm.
by myself
Yeah.
and be around a lot more.
Yeah.
Not flying all over the country to different Air Force bases all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my introduction into the world of real estate as an appraiser, and then evolved into sales. I would share one note with you, which is a little bit of a tangential point. When there are certain points in your life clearly that you'll never ever forget. And for us, when Taylor was born, I'll never forget, we were so young, and I was standing in Fairfax Hospital, and we were in the recovery room. And I remember looking out the window down to Gallows Road. And I remember having this thought, which was, for us, our world, time was standing still. And I remember looking out and seeing all the cars coming and going and the people walking and getting on and off the bus. And I almost had this, how dare they? Don't they know that the world has stopped? Like,
Yeah.
this moment in time is frozen for us. And it doesn't take long to just take a peek out the window and realize that life has a way of smacking you in the face with perspective.
Yes.
As much as our world was standing still, just a quick glance out the window and you can see life is just flashing right on by. And for whatever strange reason, I've never forgotten that. And perspective is something that I'm sure will come up again in this conversation, because it's something that I'm keenly aware of every single day. And that's just one example, but anyway.
Well, but to kind of piggyback on your point about being frozen in time in that moment, I found that children are like time travel.
Yeah.
Like, you blink your eyes and suddenly 5 years have gone by,
Oh,
and
yeah.
your kid is however old and
Yeah.
totally different. Of course, we're all the same. We haven't aged
Right.
at all.
It's the beauty of it.
Right. But yeah, I do want to speak to that moment, because that was an inflection point for anybody. Like, especially, what were you, 19, 20?
No, I was, 23, and Fran was 20, I guess. Yeah, 19. I think 19 when she was pregnant. 20. Yeah. So I mean, we were young.
That going from the Radford college life to
Being
being
parents.
being a parent,
Yeah.
like, what were the most kind of significant impacts that kind of resonate with you now at that time, that difference?
Even then, we both knew. I mean, we were wild about one another.
Mhm.
We knew that we wanted to be married. We were not married when Taylor was born. She was born in April. We got married in August. Fran's father was terminally ill, and we tried to bump the wedding up, and our bumping the wedding up was to August,
Mhm.
as opposed to further down the road, so that he could be in attendance, and he didn't make it that far. But I think we both knew that we had certain goals that we wanted to achieve. Even at that time, having goals and ideals and working toward them was super important.
Mhm.
And the biggest one at that time was that we were bound and determined that we were going to finish our degrees. So there was no shame in how we went about it. There was a difference in responsibility.
Mhm.
Certainly my grades reflected that,
Yeah.
as did my social life.
Sure. Yeah.
But I ended up graduating with the second highest GPA in my major and my concentration. And it was a night and day difference pre-Taylor and post-Taylor. So in many respects, she's the best thing that ever happened to us at that point. And when we went back down there, we rented a little townhouse a little bit further, several blocks off of campus, where it was a little bit quieter and kind of away from some of the shenanigans, so we thought. One of our neighbors ended up having a big party, and he was in a fraternity, and there were, broken windows, and the floor caved in and stuff in this townhouse next to us. And so after that, we moved completely on the other side of town, over by the hospital, in a little single-family detached house.
Yeah.
And we rented that for a couple of years and finished our degrees. So, and that was great. I mean, we loved it. We had a little garden, and
Yeah.
we were mowing the lawn, and chopping the firewood, and had a little baby running around, and friends would come over from school, and we would make dinners at our house and stuff like that. I mean, it was a lot of fun. In so many ways, you think back, life seems so much simpler then.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't trade any of the ups and downs that we went through, or the hardships, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So the challenges along the way, because they make you who you are today.
But at that time in your professional life, were you feeling pretty secure at that time?
Absolutely
Once you
not.
graduated? Yeah,
Not at all.
Tell me about
Not
that.
in any way, shape, or form. I didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, I've always had an entrepreneurial bug in me. I realized that I'm different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not wired like everybody else.
I can confirm that for anyone listening.
Right. And there's strengths and weaknesses in that, but I think that's accurate. I mean, I remember being in, I don't know, 6th grade or something and subscribing to Entrepreneur magazine.
Yeah.
I was the kid going through the neighborhood knocking on doors. And I think back, I can't even believe that people let me do this, people being my parents and or homeowners. But, I'm climbing on their roofs and hanging over the edge and cleaning out their gutters and raking leaves and mowing lawns, and then that evolved even through college, running a paint contracting business. And I've just always kind of been wired that way, if you will.
Yeah.
The idea of a ceiling to my opportunities is not something that has appealed to me, despite the safety and security. And obviously that's for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Doing what we do is not for most people. But no, there was no safety or security coming out of college. When we finished our degrees, several people I knew ended up working with this company called Equinox, which was selling water filtration units and health, products. And it was, by all intents, I guess, what people would categorize as a pyramid scheme, if you will.
Yeah.
I didn't know that at the time, and I don't really think it was a scheme. I mean, the products were actually awesome in the water filtration. This is back in the day when people thought the idea of somebody paying for water in a bottle was preposterous.
Right.
So these filters and everything came out, and they were actually really good. Unfortunately, the business model, the emphasis was on recruiting and getting people to buy inventory more so than selling product, which I think is the ultimate downfall in any model like that.
Yeah.
So no, there was no security, and that was actually gangbusters right out of college. That was wildly successful for a brief time.
Yeah.
And then it became more of a struggle, and then we moved back to Northern Virginia, where we thought the jobs were and the job opportunities. And that was leaving Southwest Virginia and coming back, quote unquote, home, but having both gone to Annandale High School and been raised on the edge of the Beltway, and then having lived down in Radford for those years, we knew we did not want to come back into the middle of the quote unquote rat race.
Right.
And so that's how we ended up out here in this area. And we've been out here since 1997, I think, 98. We rented a house in Rixieville on a farm for 8 years, and then we built the house and moved in April of 2005, and we're still there now.
That's great. So how is that, this lifestyle, Warrenton, Rixieville, more country lifestyle, different than the way you grew up?
That's very different.
Yeah.
And in mainly all positive ways. I mean, where we lived, typical in a neighborhood, sidewalks and curbs, and we lived on the corner, and a lot easier to get into trouble up there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot. It's just the congestion, the traffic, the sort of the crime, if you will. And we lived in a good neighborhood. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, nice middle class neighborhood.
Yeah.
Perfectly typical. But going to Annandale High School, there was a lot of stuff that goes on in a big public school like that your parents just simply aren't aware of.
Sure.
And whether it's drugs or violence, we had gone through a merger right before then at my time when Thomas Jefferson became the Jefferson Science and High Tech School.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was some redistricting that took place, which impacted the school pretty significantly.
Yeah.
And there were some pretty tense years there. And, it was a place where, frankly, to some extent, you had to watch your back a little bit. And out here, when you put your blinker on, when we moved out here, people would slow down and wave you over, not speed up and close the gap, you know?
Yeah.
Out here, half the time, it seems like people don't even, you meet clients, they don't lock their doors or lock their car. I'm not saying that everybody should do that, but it's just a different way of living,
Yeah. I only lock my door when I'm in the Long and Foster parking lot.
Right. As well you should. But it's just different. I mean, we like it out here, and specifically for raising kids. It's like this is an environment. It's family friendly. Anything we need in D.C. or Northern Virginia, I mean, we can get to in 45 minutes to an hour. So we have access to all of the benefits of living in Northern Virginia without having to live in Northern Virginia. And that was something that appealed to us in a big way. And then being able to raise your kids in an environment out here sometimes they would complain that it's boring or there's nothing to do, but
Sure.
for us it worked.
So that was a deliberate part of your decision making, was this is a superior place in our opinion to raise children.
No question.
So would you say that your growing up in a more kind of urban environment had any advantages that your kids didn't, or and then my next question will be disadvantages?
Yeah. So just typical growing up as a kid stuff. I mean, my best friend through high school lived 4 doors down, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there was Lake Acatink was a park right there. It was probably 9 houses from where I lived on the corner. So we would go ride our bikes around the park all the time, or, the school bus stop was on the corner of my house, so there'd be 10, 15 kids in the corner of my front yard every day.
Yeah.
That's a little different, So the proximity is both good and bad, I mean, you could sneak out at night and go find trouble if so inclined, or, out here it's, we live on 11 acres in the middle of the woods. There's not a lot of that kind of stuff going on, and I think really it sounds like I'm being maybe overly negative about our experience or Annandale, but so I'm sure we'll lead into this a little bit, but I think it ties in. So I went to St. Stephen's in basically third grade through 8th grade in Alexandria, and then went to public school through high school. So I had a pretty unique perspective on the differences between public and private school and my local neighborhood and the kids and everything else versus some of the others. So having kids of my own, I wanted to provide them what I thought was the best environment to give them. The environment would give them the best chance of success.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not feel that was the same exposure where I had growing up in the neighborhood and those schools and kind of the stuff that I saw. I mean, we saw some, I think it was pretty scary stuff, some of the fist fights in the hall or at a party or at a football game or whatever. And it was like, oh my God, I mean, there was some pretty serious stuff that went on. And I didn't want my kids being a part of that. I didn't even really want them exposed to that. Now, ironically, most of the people that I was friends with through Annandale are very successful, and they've gone on and achieved great things and stuff like that. So it's not terrible, but you know what I mean. It's just different. So it was very deliberate that we felt that this was a great place to raise kids.
So we talked a little bit about the difference in city versus country growing up with your experience in raising your kids out in the country. What about like time-wise? The period of history within which your kids grew up and the way you grew up. Like, can you think of any advantages or disadvantages that you had being a child of your elementary, middle, and high school versus your kids?
Well, I think the biggest difference is obviously going to be technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even little things like I used to try and win I think I was the first one in our neighborhood that had Frogger.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I won it by selling the most magazine subscriptions. And I did that by just relentlessly going around knocking on doors.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine today?
Yeah.
That environment? Like, I mean, I'm a father of 3 daughters, but even if I had a son, like, there's no chance I'm sending my son randomly out after school and coming back and after dark doing nothing but knocking on doors. That's crazy. Now, like when I say it out loud,
then too?
No, I mean, I don't know, was it? I didn't think so. I mean, I wasn't the only one doing it. I was allowed to do it. I did it.
Yeah.
But I mean, back then it was just like, Lake Acatink, just hop on my bike and go ride all the way around the park in the woods.
What's the difference now? Like, why do we not feel as comfortable? Because I did the same thing as a kid, and door to door selling wrapping paper and candy bars and stuff.
Well, so I don't want to take the interview down a dark hole of getting into politics and everything else, but I would submit to you that it's a very, very, very different time than we live in. I feel like than when we were growing up. I think things are far more divisive than I ever remember them being.
Yeah.
I think that there's certainly pros and cons to technology, but I think the biggest thing of all is there's just, and this is an overgeneralization, but in a lot of areas there's a tremendous lack of respect for everything, for one another, for life. When you see the violence and things.
Do you think that's related to technology?
Well, so I think where technology impacts is the speed with which information can move now is unlike anything we've ever seen before.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's people are so quick to form opinions
Yeah.
and without facts
Mhm.
or without context, and that's dangerous.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much of a spark to light a fire
Mhm.
today.
Yeah.
So I think that is a negative consequence, let alone social media and cyberbullying and, things like that. That didn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, you passed a note in class,
Right.
right, to the
Yeah.
girl that you liked or whatever.
Yeah. He'll check yes or no.
Yeah. I mean, now it's like, some of the stuff that goes on and the texting and I mean, it's devastating. Some of that stuff's out there for life. You get a 6th, 7th, 8th grade boy or
Gosh.
girl
Yeah.
to send something that can be hugely impactful for
Forever.
them, potentially forever. But I
Yeah.
mean, on their psyche and everything else, I don't really think that existed when we were kids.
Yeah. Did you kids have like iPads and stuff in high school?
Are you
And
kidding me? Heck
I'm
no.
just trying.
No.
Is it because they weren't?
It's because
Smartphone was like
we're strange
2007.
parents. We're like strict parents, right?
Yeah.
So no.
Tell me about the strangeness associated with
Yeah,
it.
no, our kids were not spoiled. Well, I would say spoiled, whatever. No, our kids did not have all the latest, greatest iPads and smartphones and all the rest of it. That came later on. I mean, it evolved, but we were never on board with the idea of just whatever the latest, greatest gadget was, our kids had to have it,
Yeah.
which was oftentimes a challenge for them because, going to a small private school, a lot of their kids had all of that stuff and then some.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
then they would come home and say, well, I want such and such, or how come I can't have such and such? Because we said so.
Yeah.
That's why.
Actually, that boundary, the relationship, the hierarchy of parent and kid is one that I'm interested to really talk with you about because you've confessed to me that people would accuse you of being overly strict.
Sure.
So I'd be curious to know your perspective as a parent, what the purpose of strictness is and how you instituted it. Like, what were your, I hate to use the word punishment, but what kind of punishment did you use to keep the kids in the boundaries you expected them to be in?
I don't really think we did much in the way of punishment, and it's all about perspective, right? So we don't really think that we're strict until you compare to the way somebody else does something, and then I guess by that standard you might be considered strict.
Yeah.
We're not a fan of what we refer to in our house as free range parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's to each their own. I mean, everybody raised, do their own thing. Life is not a competition, so it's not a my kid's better than your kid, kind of thing. But that said, if we were to look at the results and the activities and the things that our kids have done versus, some kids that had a lot more freedom and flexibility with the things that they were able to do, to some extent, I might say the results speak for themselves. I mean, our kids weren't into the same types of things and getting into trouble and stuff like that some of their peers were. And they both did well academically and athletically, and they've both continued to do well. They were both very involved in community service early on. They both had jobs early on. I mean, as soon as they were old enough to get a worker's permit, they were expected to have a job.
Yeah.
I realize that's not normal, I guess, and there's a lot of counter arguments to that. I'm sure we would get to this too, but having, and we've told them from day one, so it's no surprise, but it's interesting to us the reaction we get from other parents sometimes. But both of our kids have to pay for their own college. And we've told them that pretty much from day one. And we put both of them through private school, kindergarten through 12th. So that's 13 years times 2 kids. That's, it's 26 years of private school tuition. So we feel like we have given them an incredible foundation from which the world is their oyster, and it's up to them to make the most of it. So we don't feel bad about having them do that. And I mean, Abby just went off to Virginia Tech this year with over $20,000 in her checking account of money that she earned.
Yeah.
Well, she was given $5,000 from the grandparents, so over $15,000 of her earnings. And when I say her earnings, that's scooping ice cream at Cold Stone for whatever, $7.50 an hour. That's working the front desk at Chestnut Forks. That's waiting tables over at Harry's. That's babysitting. That's dog sitting. That's doing everything that the kid can do to scrape together her money, and then having the financial discipline to save the money, knowing that she has tuition to pay for, and 20 grand. I mean, what's that get you 1 year at a public college?
Yeah.
I mean, some of these private schools are 60,000 plus, a year, and so I think that there's a lot of lessons about that along the way. So in terms of were we strict, I don't know. I guess when I coached 2 travel soccer teams for a long time, Taylor all the way through from the beginning to the end, and same thing with Abby's. So we had a lot of exposure to a lot of families, and got to see a lot of different kids and their results, and how they achieve, whether it's athletically, academically, whether it's socially, and some kids did really, really well, and some kids it was a struggle, and
Yeah.
from all totally different backgrounds. But the one commonality that we noticed was, by and large, the influence that the parenting. So here's something we say all the time: we are big believers that the word parent is a verb, not just a noun.
Yeah. Yeah, you've told that to me before, and I appreciate that a lot.
But you can go to any restaurant, take your kids and go to a restaurant tonight. Sit there for an hour. It won't take you long to see people that don't seem like they subscribe to that philosophy.
Yeah.
Or that they're not aware of that.
I've found in conversations with people the approach with which people take parenting is often a result of the way that they grew up, either as a 180-degree flip so
Right.
that they don't have what I had,
Right.
or to try to do the same thing their parents did with them. Would you share, kind of how your being a child and parenting affected or impacted your parenting?
So my parents, my mom had me young,
Mhm.
and never went to college. My dad went to University of Richmond for a couple of years and then dropped out. And the greatest example they both provided was their work ethic. I mean, they worked their tails off.
Yeah.
And we were, I guess, looking back, and I don't know what a sociology professor would put us in, but I would say we were probably lower middle class. We didn't necessarily do without, but we also didn't have much in the way of extra anything. But we were certainly provided for, loving environment, and all of that. My dad worked all the time, it seemed like. And my mom, same thing. I mean, she had a full-time job. She worked all the time. So we had the opportunities, but when I was at St. Stephen's in Alexandria, we lived in Woodbridge at one point, then we moved to Springfield. School is 30 minutes away from you. So there was no after school baseball or after school football or after school basketball, with 2 exceptions. Last year in Woodbridge, I was able to play youth football there. And then I think one season I was able to play winter basketball when we moved to Springfield. But I didn't have those same opportunities that that all the other kids in the neighborhood had,
Mhm.
because I went to this private school. And looking back as a parent, it's easy to see the decision my parents were making. They were trying to provide me an above average opportunity
Yeah.
through attending the school, which, when you're in 5th and 6th grade and you're just being a little pain in the rear end, you're not quite recognizing that,
Yeah.
And so there was and then, through high school and stuff, and then leaving that environment and going to public high school was a big difference, a night and day difference. And then, first couple of years there were great, and that solid foundation in education from private school transferred over, and I was in some of the advanced classes and stuff, and that was good. But then as the years went by, I started to, have a little more fun and a little more fun and a little more fun, and I think that certainly put a strained relationship on with me and my parents.
Yeah.
Which I understand. I would take responsibility for that, because I was difficult to deal with in high school.
You still are, in my opinion.
Thank you. But in fairness to them, I mean, they provided. That's all we can do. We all want better for our kids, and all you can do is provide an environment that you think that gives them the best opportunity, the best chance of success, or an opportunity to excel in.
Yeah.
And at some point, it's going to be up to the kid to make the most of that opportunity. And some kids, like myself, realize that later
Mm-hmm.
versus earlier, and some kids might realize it earlier versus later,
Yeah.
and some kids might never realize it at all.
I did a journaling exercise the other day, and for the first time, kind of realized that opportunity is really the big thing I want to provide as a parent.
That's all you can
Like
do.
you said, I want them to do what I do, and I want them to be like I am.
Yeah.
But the truth is, the only thing I can control is the opportunities that they have in front of them,
Right.
and that's been recently my pivot to inspire them to take action.
Yeah.
And provide them the opportunities with which they can choose to take action on.
And truthfully, that's not much different than how I view my role here in the office with all the agents.
Yeah.
Try and provide the structure and the environment and the training to give them the best opportunity.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they're the ones that have to go make the most of it.
Most definitely.
And some of them will, and some of them won't. And I recognize that, and I'm okay with that. I know that that's not on me per se.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to make a hard tangent in the conversation. I want to talk about Riley. Tell us about Riley. She has special needs.
So her diagnosis, if you will, what she has is Aicardi syndrome, which is something that, of course, nobody's ever heard of, because at the time I think there were 500 known diagnosed cases in the world.
Wow.
And it carries with it a host of other issues, namely being ACC, which is a genus of corpus callosum, which means she was born missing the main bundle of nerves that connects the right and left side of the brain. Mm-hmm. So she doesn't have one. It's like being born without a finger, and it's not going to grow, Mm-hmm. So that, and then there are all kinds of there's some skeletal abnormalities with, she has some butterflying of some of her ribs and, development things. And there's a wide range of spectrum, if you will, of kids that have this Aicardi syndrome in terms of their functional abilities. But the pregnancy was completely normal. Delivery was completely normal. Everything was normal. Birth was completely normal. And about an hour after she was born, unbeknownst to us, she stopped breathing. And then, thank God, the nurse was in the room, and the nurse basically just whisked her whole crib contraption out of the room, said, "Dad, come with me," grabbed me by the arm, and just tore us out of the room. And Fran's left sitting there not having any idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think we spent 12 days in the NICU in Fairfax, and they don't just come say, "Oh, your child has Aicardi." It was a long process. It took several months for them to actually figure out the full diagnosis. And a doctor with not the best bedside manner came in and told Fran and I what she had, and that 95% of the kids with her condition don't make it past the age of 6 or 7, and then promptly left the room.
Yeah.
So we are, left there with more questions than answers, not knowing what we're even looking at. And the worst thing you can do is get on the internet, right?
Sure.
And play doctor. So of course we did that, because that's a good idea.
Of course. Yeah.
And most of what you see on there doesn't give you the warm fuzzies.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot to take in and a lot to deal with. But she, when she was real young, so her condition, she's now 16 years old. She'll be 17 in March. She doesn't walk or talk. She really can't use the right side very much. Like, she can't use her right hand or right arm very much. She can use her left. She used to be able to, what we call scooch. She used to be able to scooch around on the ground, and, she does have cognitive ability. She can let you know if she's happy or sad for sure, and she can play with her toys, and she has favorite toys, and there are certain sensory things that she likes, and certain things that really capture her attention. So you learn all of these things. And they have changed. She had a major back surgery because she had scoliosis that, if I showed you the x-ray, doesn't even look like it's human.
Yeah. Before
the surgery. And they had to put 2 metal rods, to the point where she was so bent over it was starting to crush her organs and affecting organ development. So it wasn't the need for surgery was a critical need for surgery. Mm-hmm. And so they put 2 rods in, and I think she's got, 32 screws and umpteen wires and this, that, and the other that keep her basically straight up. Well, since then she can't scooch around on the floor anymore.
Yeah.
But she's still, she has her favorite types of toys, which are mainly things that make noise or that, as I make this, everybody can see when I crinkle with my left hand, right? Like this crinkle paper, things that are texture, whether it's different balls, things like that, things that light up. So if you put her bag of toys next to her, she'll reach over to them. She'll knock them over. She'll pick out her favorite. She'll play with them. She'll throw them.
Yeah.
You put it back. She'll play with it again. She'll throw it again. You know,
Yeah.
all on her left side. So her, you know, in terms of her ability to function, it is limited. Many kids with her condition are fed through an IG tube. We don't have that, although the gastroenterologist has several times suggested that, and my wife is adamant against that because eating is one of the few things that she can do, and Fran's not willing to strip her of that. Now, when I say eating, she eats mashed potatoes and like a Gerber strawberry banana oatmeal.
Yeah.
That's the extent of her diet, and then Pediasure. So when I say it's limited, that's her diet.
Yeah.
And, you know, Fran has to put her in a special high chair thing that we have. And you have to hold her left hand because she always wants to put it in her face. It's like a sensory texture thing. And Fran will have to feed her like you would feed a baby, you know.
Yeah.
So we refer to her affectionately as our big baby.
Well, with Aicardi, you had 2 children on the ground already. I guess they would have been 12 and 6 or something, or
Yeah, Abby. Well, no, Abby and Riley are 2 years apart, and Taylor was 8, I think, when Riley was born. I think Abby was 6.
Okay,
I mean, I'm
so-
sorry. I think Taylor was 8, Abby was 2.
So for the benefit of anybody who might, during pregnancy or after birth, realize that their child is going to have special needs,
Yeah.
let's say the first 2 or 3 years, could you kind of help set some expectations on what that does to
The
or what
family
it-
dynamic.
Yeah.
So, well, we didn't know,
Mhm.
right, until after she was born.
Right.
So I can't speak to what that would be like planning ahead of how we're going to deal with this, you know. This is one of those deals, like many things in life. It's, you know, you take it one day at a time. That's all you can do. And, you know, you ask Fran something she says, I don't know, you know, I can't think past tomorrow. Like,
Yeah.
for us, it's literally one day at a time. And there is a certain uncertainty that we live with, knowing that she's, you know, 16 going on 17. And that's kind of a weird thing to live with, you know.
You can imagine.
And
Can't.
yeah, but you know, so again, that's you do things one day at a time.
How did Riley's welcoming into your family affect your kids?
Well, Abby was 2, so I don't think she necessarily knew,
Yeah.
you know, any different. She's always been incredibly. I think it's impacted them both tremendously as they've grown up. But for Abby, she's always been so loving and so compassionate, and I don't know that she's that same person without these challenges.
Yeah.
And Taylor is also very loving and compassionate, but Taylor was a little bit older, so I think there was more of an adjustment for Taylor. Abby was 2, so she kind of grew up not knowing any different.
Sure.
You know, Taylor was 8, so she was old enough that it was very different for her, you know, and sure she could probably answer better than I about how, you know, to some extent how that impacted her, but you know, there was a lot of sacrifices to be made by the whole family, just in terms of, I mean, the biggest one of all, you got 2 parents with, you know, career paths and trajectory looked good, and you know, working at AOL, and I'm selling IT, and you know, you think life's going to be a certain way,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, you know, there are no guarantees, and then you got to figure it out all by yourself, and you got to be around a lot more. Like, how are you going to do that?
Yeah.
You know, and so certain opportunities for the kids, we wanted to always make sure, and this is, you know, just giving some thought. Since you originally asked me about doing this, you know, there are certain things that, again, I realize we don't think like everybody else. And, you know, we've done some things that would arguably be crazy, but we've done them for our kids.
Yeah.
So some of the sacrifices that we have made along the way, we never wanted, despite the challenges that we had to deal with Riley, we didn't want that to limit what Taylor and Abby could do. So whether that was, you know, playing soccer or travel soccer, or Taylor playing AAU basketball or whatever it was, you know, Riley was just always in tow, you know, with a couple exceptions along the way of, you know, some periods of medical stress, if you will,
Sure.
where she couldn't be there. But the kids, I don't know if we achieved it or not, but our objective was always to afford them the same opportunities that they would otherwise have in terms of activities and stuff. So we We always did that. Now I say that, when Abby's given a speech in high school in the Rice Theater, we're either in the very, very back row, or sometimes Fran is just outside the Rice Theater with Riley in her stroller, and they would put on the little TV so that Fran could watch it too.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't be in the theater because she might start making noises or acting up or something like that. When we go to restaurants, growing up, we have to, what restaurant we go to and what time we go it's all about what's Riley friendly, what's Riley conducive. So there are places that we can't go with her. One of yours and mine favorite restaurants in town is Claire's. Well, that's not exactly a Riley friendly place, know. So if we want to go there for my birthday, which is in July, we will go early, like when they open, and we will sit on the back patio where we can bring her in and out by the caboose. We can't bring her through the front door. And even if we could, the tables and everything is so close together, you can't fit her in there with a wheelchair.
Right.
We can't go to Outback on a Friday night at 7 o'clock. Like, that's not an option for us. So maybe we would go to Longhorn at 4 o'clock or 4:30, before it gets crowded. And then even within the restaurants, there are certain tables that we know that are conducive where we can get her in and get her out. So the kids have always grown up with those sorts of, I don't want to say challenges, but an awareness, if you will. And, they're not deprived of opportunities to go out. It's just that we have to do it a little bit differently, you know. But I think that they would tell you, I hope that they would tell you, and I know that Fran and I were very deliberate about it. We did everything we could to try and make sure that they had every opportunity that they would otherwise have, that the impact to them in terms of their opportunities was not going to be felt, or at least minimized to as great as we could minimize it.
Yeah.
And I think that we achieved that. I mean, we didn't take ski vacations and stuff like that, because you can't do that. That's not Riley conducive. But I think we've done okay with it.
For anyone that you've mentioned, when you find out you have a child that has special needs like that, and it automatically turns your expectations to the future around, I gotta believe that was traumatic, in the sense that my life's already kind of planned in my head. Now it's a total blank slate.
Yeah.
Like, anyone staring at that as a prospect, do you have any advice for somebody on how you kind of manage through that experience?
It's a process, and it's a little bit of a reset. And, I always hear people talk about, different life circumstances, and they say, I guess some people say that everything happens for a reason. Some people say all you can do is one day at a time. For us, people will say, woe is me, or why me? Why did this happen to us? And some people would say, oh, well, so-and-so was so great. They never asked why me, why that never happened. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah.
I think that it's only natural to have a little bit of what is going on and why is this happening. Now, you can't dwell on that. That's not going to get you any farther in the future. I remember we had a health scare with Taylor when she was a freshman in college, and we got a call. They thought she had meningitis, which she did not, but they thought that she did. And we got the call that basically says, you need to get down here right now. And we did what you do, and we rushed down there.
Yeah.
And I do remember talking to a friend of mine on the phone at that time and just saying, I refused to believe that she had that. Just blanket refused. And they're like, well, why were you so adamant? And I said, because there's no way that God, we already have this challenge. There's no way that God would put that on us. I just refuse to believe it.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's just completely naive or why I felt that way, but I just refused to believe it. So I guess I try and tie that back into what would parents do. Trying to figure out why me is pointless. It doesn't matter. It is what it is. It's one of the things that I've learned kind of as I've gotten older, professionally and personally, that has been a great asset to me, is trying to focus on that which I can control and not that which I can't control.
Right.
So Fran and I can't control that Riley was born with the condition that she's born with, but what we can control is what we do about it or how we handle it.
Yeah.
That's within our control. So I would encourage any parent who has a child with special needs, focus on that which you can control, and then take it one day at a time, and you do the best you can with it. And it's not, there is no blueprint, and there's no right or wrong per se. I mean, you do what you think is best for you and your family and that child to, continue to give your family unit the greatest chance of success, and to do everything you can for that child along the way. So Taylor, we had, not this summer, I guess about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago now, summers ago, Fran and Riley spent 19 days of the month of June in the hospital, in Fairfax Hospital.
Wow.
And that's not our first trip like that, but
Yeah.
but this one was weird because the whole time they couldn't figure out what was going on. So it was a little bit scary. And long and short is she had an allergic reaction to an antibiotic, so it seems silly that something so small could have been such a deal. But anyway, where I'm going with this is, unbeknownst to us, Taylor during that time took it upon herself to apply for a Make-A-Wish trip for Riley.
Yeah.
And so our family vacation last summer, I say vacation in quotes because it's not what I would plan for a vacation,
Yeah.
but it was fun. It was cool. We went down to Atlanta, Georgia, to the Georgia Aquarium, because one of the things that we have discovered through time is that Riley loves aquariums.
Yeah.
She loves, you can wheel her right up to the big tank, and she will just sit there and watch the fish and the sharks and stuff go by. You could leave her there for hours.
Yeah.
She's mesmerized by it. So the Georgia Aquarium is the second largest aquarium in the world, and they have this tunnel that goes underneath and everything, and you're just basically in the middle of this tank.
How'd you feel watching her, look at all that?
It was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was absolutely amazing to see. So what can you do about it as a parent? You provide you do everything you can for your family, and then you provide opportunities specific to that child as best you can. And that whole trip was all about her.
Yeah.
And so while that's not what I would pick for a family vacation, it wasn't about me or what I would pick. It was about her, and it was really such a great thing that Taylor did, putting that together. And it was amazing. I mean, the pictures that we have and everything, I mean, she is absolutely in awe.
Yeah.
And so the girls are already plotting to try and do like a big 18th birthday party for her. And they said, oh, we should have it in an aquarium. And one of the cool things is, I mean, it's the second largest aquarium in the world, so it's kind of a big deal. And because it was through Make-A-Wish and everything, we were able to go, I think it was for 30 minutes or maybe an hour before they opened, and have special private tour and private access, like this whole bubble tunnel thing. We were the only ones in there for like a half hour.
Yeah.
And it was really neat. And then we did, stuff the rest of the day. We had seemingly strangers coming up to us. They were divers.
Oh, yeah.
They were in there feeding the animals, and they were like, oh, you guys were the ones down in the tunnel this morning. We saw you. Oh, she looked like she was having so much fun.
That's wonderful.
And she was laughing, and the look on her face and everything, and the pictures, they say pictures worth 1,000 words, but and I'm sure you saw some of them on Facebook and stuff, but the pictures of her during that trip and during that time were unbelievable, because there are certain things that don't do a lot for her, Interestingly, with her condition, so I said that she has seizures every day. So the slightest thing just can send her into a seizure.
Yeah.
If you're at a restaurant, somebody drops a plate, if a quiet restaurant, somebody drops a plate, or even drops a fork on the table and it hits a plate, that can send her into a seizure.
Wow.
If we pick out a frying pan out of the cabinet too loud and it jostles the other pans, that can put her into a seizure.
Yeah.
So we are conditioned to where Fran and I could be at a restaurant and somebody drops a plate, we both kind of cringe.
Sure.
And it's like, ugh, because we're so conditioned about that.
Yeah.
Interestingly, white noise. So if we're in a busy restaurant where it's really loud and there's people everywhere and somebody drops a plate, that won't even impact her.
Yeah.
Because she just, it's not a startling noise. So we took her when we were in Atlanta on this trip to Georgia Aquarium. We took her to an Atlanta Braves game, to a professional baseball game.
Yeah.
And we were apprehensive about, she doesn't, no cognitive ability to follow the game of baseball.
Sure.
But, we used to take her to Highland basketball games and stuff like that. Sometimes we'd have to cover her ears with the buzzer or warn her that the buzzer was coming by making noises ahead of time so that it was more like white noise. She loved it. The sounds, the ballpark, the fireworks, the big screen, all the lights. She thought the beer man was hysterical because, it's handicap seating. The guy's coming up and down the stairs, and she's at the top of the stairs on the right-hand side. And every time he would yell, beer man, like she thought that was funny. So she's laughing and having a great time. So it's interesting. You pick up on these different things that resonate with her that would not resonate with anybody else. And, you try and highlight those, and you try and make those things available to her.
Yeah.
And, but it's very different, the motivations and stuff are very different. And then, we just took Abby back down to school this weekend, and we went to a basketball game at Virginia Tech Wake Forest game. Well, if we were to have taken Riley for this weekend, for this trip, now it's a whole production for us to do something like that.
Sure.
We had to call Fran's parents to come out and watch Riley during the day on Friday till Taylor could get off of work. And then Taylor and David have to come over after work. And then they stayed Friday and Saturday night until we could get back Sunday.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of logistical pieces in doing that. If we were to have tried to take Riley on that trip, we wouldn't have been able to stay in the Airbnb that we stayed in because of the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have been able to sit in the seats that we sat in at the basketball game because they're not handicap accessible. We would have had to have made special arrangements through the athletic department to get handicap seating. And oh, by the way, whenever you can get handicap seating, you're only allowed one accessibility partner.
Mm-hmm.
So we were a family of, in that case, there was 3 of us down there. If Riley was there, it would have been 4. So that would have meant one person would sit with Riley, and then 2 other people would sit over in these other seats wherever you could get them.
Yeah.
So there's just weird things like that that you need to consider that you would not otherwise have to consider. For us, it's our normal.
Yeah.
And
let me jump in real quick. I want to ask another question for the benefit of parents. Are there like communities of parents of special needs that can relate to each other and talk to each other? Like maybe when Riley was first born, did you get introduced to other parents of children with Aicardi?
A little bit. I mean, Riley's condition, Aicardi, is so rare, that it's very few and far between. There was a specialist that, ironically, was in Fairfax Hospital. He's now in Boston, but people used to, from up and down the East Coast, come to see him. We did go meet one other family whose child had it, but a very, very mild version of it. I mean, this girl was running around up and down stairs chasing her brother. And we were
wow.
like, so where's the one with the Aicardi?
Yeah.
And Riley was just an infant.
Was that helpful nonetheless?
It was interesting because it was so different than where we were. But again, she was an infant. Mm-hmm. In our case, I don't know if false optimism is the right word, but you almost thought, well, maybe she could be like that someday. Yeah. Well, Riley's never going to be that, like that level of functioning.
What would you recommend to special needs parents? That would be something to help them reconcile.
We really haven't done a lot of that. There is an Aicardi conference each year. We've never gone. Fran doesn't do much in the way of like support group type stuff. I mean, there are certain services available through the county or whatever, and certain programs that Riley's in where there are certain mandates where somebody will have to come for a house visit once a month or whatever, things like that. But it's not something that we have done that we have a lot of experience with. I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, I think that conceptually it's certainly a good idea, but it's not something that we've taken much advantage of. I can't speak to it, but with such intelligence. I will say one thought was everybody's always amazed, and Fran does. I mean, Fran's the one that does it all. I sent her a jokey thing on Facebook or whatever I saw, and it said about a mom's job is something like, oh, you work 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day, like lucky you, because mom's hours are from when her eyes are open to when her eyes are closed. And Fran replied back, and she said, and in the middle of the night.
Yeah, these things are true.
Right, because Riley will still get up in the middle of the night sometimes crying and stuff.
Yeah.
And it is true. And so Fran is the one that does everything, for Riley. I mean, really. And so people always say, I don't know how you guys do it. I don't know how you guys do it. And there was a time when, I don't want to say Fran took offense to that, but she didn't like when people would say, I don't know how you guys do it. Because in her mind, it was like, how do you not do it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what you do.
Yeah.
And so I bring that up because that's our norm. Mm-hmm. And so I think any family dealing with anything like special needs or having a child with special needs, is it different? Yeah. Is it impactful? Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
But it becomes your norm, like anything else. So for us, that's our norm. Even people looking at you funny when you're in the store, when we're pushing Riley through the stroller, and Fran's gone through several iterations of strollers, and they always have to be red because she says we're known around town as the red stroller.
Oh, is that?
So whether it's on the Greenway where we're walking, or at Athey, or at Safeway, or at Walmart, or whatever, we're known as the red stroller. But you even get used to the looks that people give you.
Yeah.
Because people look.
Yeah.
Especially little kids. I mean, little kids, they stare, and because it's not computing to them.
Sure.
Why is this teenager being treated like a baby,
mm-hmm.
or have a a binky clip to her.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But for us, it's our norm. So we just, you get used to it.
I've always known you to just do it.
Yeah. There's what's the alternative?
Well, another hard pivot.
Yeah.
Let's get into some super short answers, and
Yeah.
then we go super, super short answers and like a kind of a lightning
42.
round. Like that. Am I supposed to give the answer in a question? Okay, so is there something about your kids that you're proud of?
Oh, just about everything. Yeah.
What is something you're particularly proud of?
Both of their work ethic.
What is a milestone that you've had as a dad that pops into your head?
A milestone as a dad. I would probably have to say Taylor's wedding was, certainly a milestone as a dad. I mean, as a father of a daughter,
Yeah.
that's a day that you always see off in the future. And then, so not only, really, I guess that's the one that jumps out, because not just Taylor and getting married, but the entire event, and seeing Abby's participation in that as a bridesmaid, and seeing her give her speech, and seeing what Fran did with Riley and how she was done up and how she was able to participate in the ceremony and everything. And it was pretty cool.
So with that in mind, from raising your children to now them being, more or less adults, particularly Taylor, married in a luxury townhome.
Right.
Has your role to Taylor, how do you see that changing, your role as a dad?
I think that I think that you become more of a friend.
Yeah.
And more of a consultant. That's not the right word, but it's less parenting and more just discussion. Consult is probably not the right word, but that's the word that comes to mind.
Yeah.
So when there are big issues, whether it's promotion or job or a problem she's having at work, or when they were going through their house stuff, and just whatever.
Like guidance or counseling?
Yeah. It's just talking things through and trying to point out the potential pitfalls or the pros and cons, and how to analyze a situation, looking at the pros and cons. And, just longer, deeper talks probably. We spend a lot of time together because we go down to the football games and stuff like that. So we'll be tailgating, or we went to the Military Bowl in Annapolis, and, she and David and I probably spent 2 hours sitting by the fire just talking.
That's wonderful. I think that's Richard Branson. I think it was Richard Branson said, I will have succeeded as a parent if my kids like me when they're adults.
Right.
So
they have fun too, because they don't want to admit that their dad's cool. But we have fun.
I'm a cool dad.
We dance in the timeouts in the stadium and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're like, Dad, seriously?
What's an attribute of yours as a father that you're proud of?
I hope. Well, I would probably say work ethic. If there's one thing that I could, we could point to all kinds of highs and lows, and we've been through them, financially and professionally and everything else. But through it all, I don't think that anybody could say that I didn't work my tail off.
Yeah.
And I think that above all has hopefully served as a great example to them, that you're going to have highs and lows, you're going to have challenges, and the best advice I could give them is to just work your way through it. You don't have to be the smartest guy in the room, and if you are, you're in the wrong room.
Love that.
But, if you can work harder than everybody else in the room, you're gonna make it wherever you're trying to go.
What are 3 adjectives you would use to describe somebody that might be a super dad?
Certainly loving or caring.
Mm-hmm.
To some extent ambitious, and it's more of a phrase than an adjective, but I would say, having integrity.
Great.
Like it's great to have the work ethic, it's great to have the ambition, it's great to do all that stuff, but if you do it without integrity, then I would submit to you, you've defeated the whole purpose. You've done the opposite of what you hope to achieve.
What are some things, or what is one thing that's on your not to-do list as a dad?
Well, I don't think you ever want to let your kids down. I don't know, that can take many shapes and sizes, but no matter what, as a father, you don't want to let your kids down.
What gift would you give to all the dads? If you could give a gift to every dad on the planet, what gift would you give them?
Like a material gift, a physical gift, a piece of wisdom?
Wherever your mind goes.
Well, I like to read.
Yeah.
which unfortunately I haven't had as much time to do. I think that I would, and I've said this to my daughters because I give them these books or I suggest titles to them, and they're like, whatever. But ironically, Taylor's in a book club, and she'll say, "Do you have a copy of such?" Matter of fact, I do.
I do.
That's
And I
right.
read it.
Smarty pants. I would be inclined to say my collection of books.
Collection of
I
books.
said to
That's
them, if
great.
something happened to me, that they, instead of fighting over who got what collection, to take some of the money and replicate the collection, they could each have a full collection of all the books I've read.
Well, that's a great segue into asking you this question. If your professional and parent life was a book, what's the name of 2 or 3 chapters?
Get back up,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to fall.
Yeah.
But get back up would be one of them. Probably see the future would be another one, about looking forward and having goals and goal setting.
Yeah.
And then I would have to have one, not to borrow the phrase from Nike, which is also a great book on that I should tell you about. But at some point, you've just got to do it.
Yeah.
So probably just do it.
Your greatest fear as a dad?
I mean, that says it right there. In my office.
Don't wish for it, work for it?
Yeah.
It'd be too much for some people.
Oh,
Those aren't your
now
people?
that, I know this is a segue, but I'll make it brief. Yeah. That is one of my favorite signs, and I have sent that to both of my daughters, and they gave that to me for Christmas. And it says, "You will be too much for some people. Those aren't your people." As a father of daughters in particular, looking to carve their way into the world, I love that.
I like that a lot. It resonates more and more the more I read, the more I think about my kids.
Yeah. So what was the question?
Greatest fear as a father?
Probably that my influence on my kids is wasn't enough. Like the positive influence you try and have on your children, if it wasn't enough. So based on really, I guess, the decisions they make and the people that they become, if I was to look back on that and they struggled in those areas, I don't know how I wouldn't have to look in the mirror and say my influence wasn't enough. What's
the greatest hope you have for your children?
Oh, that they just achieve the best, that they achieve their maximum potential, which is, none of us will ever do that.
Yeah.
We're all a work in progress, but that as long as they are continually striving for that, I want them to have freedom. I want them to have choices. I don't want them to go through the struggles financially and stuff, professionally, personally, that we have gone through per se, but that's part of the process. So they're still going to have their bumps along the way.
That resonates heavily with me. Who is a TV dad that you like?
So the sarcastic part of me would immediately jump to Red Foreman, right?
I don't know. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Calls every
70s show.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I always liked to watch Andy Griffith, and I always thought that his the way that he would try and impart his words of wisdom on Opie was fun. I don't even know. What about Leave It to Beaver? They don't even show that anymore. Ward Cleaver, what a great dad.
This is one of my favorite questions that Tim Ferriss asks his guests, except I, of course, change it to apply to this. If you had a billboard on 95 and all the dads on the planet were driving north and south could read this billboard and you could just populate it with one message, advice to dads.
Advice to dads on a billboard.
Has to fit on a billboard. You got to read it at 80 miles an hour driving by.
That is an interesting question.
Yeah, I love it.
One that I'd like to have more thought on.
I know.
A billboard for dads. Lead by example.
Perfect. All right, this is my last question. This is recorded. It may last forever. So your kids, their kids, their kids, their kids may listen to this.
Right.
Would you like to say something to them?
I think that when you get old, certainly for all of us, you get older, you get wiser. Fran and I just talked about this on Sunday on the drive back. We hope that at some point your kids will look back and understand and appreciate everything you tried to do for them.
Mm-hmm. You want anything unprompted? No more questions.
No, that's good. This is
I
fun.
could have kept you for another 2 hours, but I'm
there's
trying
lots
to keep it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many there's so many different topics on the general thing of how to dad or how to be a father or how to be a parent. You know, some of the struggles that you go through, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have challenges. Riley obviously it presents unique set of circumstances for a family to deal with. But I would submit to you that I'm sure I wouldn't be the father that I am if it wasn't for her.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Fran and I wouldn't be the husband and wife or the mother and father that we are without her. And I don't think that Taylor and Abby would be who they are without the influence on her. I mean, you know, the how involved they are. You know, Taylor is now a wish granter for Make-A-Wish. She and David have 2 cases.
Wow.
You know, Abby's always been involved in this top soccer and won a national award for it. One kid in the entire country.
Wow.
For her volunteer efforts and stuff. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of volunteer work.
Yeah.
I don't know that Taylor and Abby are those kids if it wasn't for Riley.
Yeah.
So while some people might look at a situation or, you know, circumstances like that and think that it's a tremendous challenge and oh my god, yeah, there are challenges with it, but the upsides far outweigh the challenging sides.
Yeah.
So anyway, this was fun.
I had a lot of fun, Dave. I really appreciate your taking the time to do it.